I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Tom Collins.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Sometimes a child's birth parents cannot look after them. Around 100,000 children in the UK are looked after by the state, and most of us are familiar with the concepts of adoption and fostering. But it is estimated that well over 100,000 children in the UK are being raised by members of their extended family or by friends of their family. They are being cared for by kinship carers. An ever-increasing number of children are now in kinship care. Staying with a family member or friend has a range of benefits over being looked after by the state. Kinship care can reduce trauma, provide valuable stability and help children preserve their sense of identity and connection to their community. Yet, despite being both widespread and beneficial, kinship care has remained undervalued and under-recognised by our systems. It's astonishing that, as of yet, councils are under no obligation to ensure that potential kinship placements are always explored and assessed for suitability before children become looked after. And yet children who grow up in kinship care are more likely to be kept with their siblings compared to those in foster care, have better social and emotional well-being and better long-term physical health, are more likely to have stable, permanent homes, achieve higher levels of employment later in life, and are more likely to report that they feel loved. Making kinship care the first choice, rather than the lucky product of chance, is a simple change, and I hope the Minister might speak to its pursuit. Yeah. And there are other ways that kinship carers could be put on a more equal footing. For example, many would be helped to stay in active employment by being allowed employment leave rights that are equal to those for parents who are adopting. Another simple change that could make a big difference. But there is one way in which our systems are very clearly failing children and their dedicated carers that I would like to address. And I'd like to share some experiences of kinship carers that are sadly typical and as they frequently struggle to prove to hospitals, schools, doctors and dentists that they have parental responsibility. I will.
Madam Speaker, first of all, can I commend the Honourable Gentleman for Worcester for bringing this forward? He's absolutely right to bring this up. I spoke to him beforehand. He knows partly what I'm going to say, and it's just to refer to Northern Ireland as an example. And perhaps that might be something that maybe the Minister would be aware of and might wish to follow, perhaps a bit of the way of putting it. Northern Ireland has a higher rate of kinship, 31% looked after children, compared to England of 16%. Largely due to a long-standing cultural emphasis on family placements. There's also the fact that Northern Ireland offers the most consistent support as all approved kinship foster carers are legally entitled to the same weekly allowance as mainstream foster carers, ranging from £149 to £268 per week. Does the Honourable Member agree that perhaps what we do in Northern Ireland, as so often is the case, might be a lead for the Minister, and indeed for the very thing that the Minister and the Honourable Member wishes to see?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank him for his intervention. I'm very grateful for him raising good cases and good examples that we might like to follow, and I appreciate him having spoken with me beforehand about his experiences in the situation in Northern Ireland. I'd like to share the experiences of Claire. She said, "I rushed into A&A in a complete panic. I was carrying my 2-year-old nephew who was struggling to breathe. The receptionist barely looked up as she asked me my nephew's name and date of birth. Her next question filled me with fear. 'Who are you?' As I answered, she looked up and I knew what was coming. A barrage of questions about why I had taken care of this child. Where was his mother? Could I prove that social services knew he was in my care? And, most terrifyingly of all, did I know that the hospital could not treat him without the consent of someone with parental responsibility? He was struggling to breathe, his face white as a sheet and his chest heaving, while this person was calmly telling me that they couldn't help. Donna's step-grandchild was badly injured. The only thing she could do was call the local authority to see if they would vouch for her. It took 2 hours for the call to be returned. The child had lost blood and was in tremendous pain. Only once it was explained by the social worker that Donna was the legal guardian did they give him pain relief and begin to treat the injury. However, the injury would require surgery, and at a hospital in the next county an hour's drive away, once again Donna had to explain who she was. No one from the first hospital was there to verify that Donna was the carer. She had to call Children's Services again, which took 4 hours to wait for verification.
Will you give way?
I will.
Melanie on.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way, and the examples that he cites are incredibly traumatic. These situations are even more complicated for those who do not have legal parental rights, who have an informal kinship arrangement. Has he had any thoughts about what could be done to support those families?
I thank her for that. And it's true that there is a real diversity in the situations of kinship carers, both in the causes and finding themselves caring for young people and in the legal structures that they're operating under. And we totally recognise that as we move forward in trying to tackle these issues, we need to be really open-eyed to that full range of different experiences and situations. Caroline tells her story. Eve landed on her arm, screamed out in pain. One look and I knew it was broken. I took her to the emergency department and she was admitted immediately to the children's ward. An x-ray was taken and Eve was administered morphine. The consultant booked Eve in for an operation the following day. She had been on morphine all night to help with the pain. The surgeon came round and explained the procedure. Eve was prepped, and then as the anaesthetist came with a form to sign, he asked who I was. I told him I was aunt and the legal guardian. He then asked to see the legal order. I told him I had that no one had asked, and he said I refused to administer anaesthetic without seeing the legal document. I had been up all night with a crying young girl. The last thing I thought about was a legal order. I called my husband, who had to leave work to go home and find the document. It took 2 hours for the photo ID to be sent. During this time, my daughter was hooked up to morphine. We had to wait for the anaesthetist to finish his surgery list to look at the photo on my phone, which was accepted in the blink of an eye. Steph points out that this happens consistently. I have to show copies at all doctors, dentists, school, etc. Any time we have to make a decision for him, I have to show proof. Can you imagine if I lost that piece of paper? It's not right having to explain that you are the carer in front of the child again and again. Imagine how the child feels. Sadly, these situations are typical, and as Steph points out, they can be deeply traumatising for both children and carers. Christine says, I really don't want to carry my SGO with me. I'm worried I will lose it or will get into the wrong hands. She's not alone, and it's also perhaps not fair of us to expect clinical professionals to recognise the various forms of legal document that aren't recorded on any government system, but instead live as paper artefacts with mysterious acronyms like SGO, Special Guardianship Order, or CAO, Child Arrangement Order. How can we be failing children and kinship carers so badly? And yet there is hope. Christine goes on to say, we should be given a card with a barcode and all the details they need to know so that you can keep it in your purse. Caroline agrees. We need an ID card that will live in my purse so I don't have to go through this again. Kinship Carers UK, a national charity based in my constituency of Worcester, have the answer. They are ready to help develop an authorised photographic kinship carer ID card and app for all carers, regardless of the type of legal order. This card would allow kinship carers to live fully prepared for any eventuality. It would allow clinical staff to immediately recognise and validate a kinship guardianship situation and deliver best practice in trauma-informed care, never requiring a family to retell their story or relive past trauma to simply access basic care. And the benefits go further. Preventing the situations described by our kinship families will save money as well as distress. The cost savings to councils on social worker time, no longer spent answering queries, or to the NHS in rebooked appointments are hard to quantify, especially as the ONS has not managed to identify all kinship children, and health trusts don't record instances of rebooked treatments for this reason. But even conservative estimates show a kinship carer ID card paying for itself within a year. Kinship Carers UK have already been in talks with DHSC and have received a positive response. They're ready to fundraise to secure resources for development, but talks have stalled. As work on the NHS app pushes a full digital implementation of Kinship Carer ID back to potentially 10 years away. For kinship families, that is too long. And we as a government of action, innovation, partnership and collaboration can do better. With a coordinated plan in partnership with the Department of Education and DHSC and possibly MOJ, Kinship Carers UK can lead a consortium of charities to realise the ID card and information resources for NHS workers. This could be realised within 2 years for later digital integration with the NHS in a decade. So my ask of the Minister this evening is simple. Will he arrange to meet with Kinship Carers UK, myself and the Secretary of State for Health to formulate a plan with the following goals? To have authorised kinship carer ID cards issued by the end of 2028, for final adoption by the NHS by 2035. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's time for us to act and do what kinship carers are asking us to do, make the system work for them, not against them. Kinship carers work tirelessly to give the children they raise the very best opportunities in life. Let's match their commitment. Let's commit to ending the stories we heard this evening and begin a new one, when this government stepped up and delivered the kinship ID card.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, the member for Worcester, for securing a debate on this important matter. Madam Deputy Speaker, like him, I recognise the enormous contribution that kinship carers make to children's lives. This government is committed to helping more children grow up in safe, stable and loving homes within their family networks, wherever it is in the child's best interests. I want to begin by acknowledging the incredible commitment and generosity of kinship carers. By opening their hearts and homes to some of the country's most vulnerable children, they are transforming the future generation. We should not underestimate the life-changing difference that kinship carers make every single day to children across this country. Kinship children and families need support to navigate the very challenging circumstances they find themselves in.
On that point,
I will gladly give way.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way. He's giving a comprehensive answer to my honourable friend's speech. One of my constituents, Natalie, she had 7 nephews and nieces brought to her door, and she was told by police and social services that it'd be really good if she took them in. She was then told she wasn't entitled to any support whatsoever because it was a family arrangement, but she hadn't made the arrangement herself. Now, she's a hero for taking those children in, and I accept that there are multiple campaigns stating what kinship carers should be entitled to. But would the Minister agree that in this circumstance, with these unambiguous details, that she absolutely should get the support that she was entitled to?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for raising that point, and it's because of stories exactly like that one from aunts and uncles and grandparents and other relatives across the country who often step in to these children's lives at no notice sometimes, waking up one morning to find that they are now responsible for very young children, sometimes babies and newborns, that I recommended a whole series of changes when I undertook the independent review of children's social care in 2022, in which I described kinship carers as the silent, unheard majority of the care system. Under this government, they are now being heard, and I want to set out a few of the things that the government is taking forward now and in the coming weeks, which seeks to change the situation for kinship carers across this country. To, first of all, ensure that family networks and kinship care is always fully explored, as the Honourable member mentioned from good examples in Northern Ireland and actually elsewhere in the UK. We are legislating right now to require all local authorities to offer a family group decision-making process, like a family group conference meeting, to all parents or those with parental responsibility whose child's case has reached the pre-proceeding stage. This will bake in the need for services to engage proactively with the whole family network, not just parents, to establish whether the family themselves have got a better answer to look after that child than the care system itself may have. This, more than anything else, will probably be the factor that shifts the culture within children's social care to put that initial focus on kinship networks, and backed alongside it with the rollout of family network support packages where councils can then fund some of those more informal arrangements where they are a way of avoiding children's need to enter the care system.
Will you give way?
I'll gladly give way.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way, and I know he's been a big advocate for kinship carers before becoming a Minister and still now. Kinship care is incredibly hard for everyone involved. It often arises from really difficult circumstances, and the family members who make that commitment often give up a lot to do so. So I just wonder if the Minister will join me in paying tribute to Sue Nash, who is a local volunteer in my constituency, who runs the Peterborough Kinship Carers Support Group, providing support to kinship carers all across Peterborough and North West Cambridgeshire, and really assists them to access the support they need and sort of share best practice and learn from one another.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd be absolutely delighted to recognise Sue Nash and the amazing work that she and so many others are doing across the country through kinship support groups. The second thing I was going to mention was that the government have supported the charity Kinship to run 140 peer support groups and training packages across England so that kinship carers have got a platform to support one another and also navigate some of the very complex systems that sit around the kinship family system. We widened therapeutic help for children through the Adoption and Special Guardianship Support Fund, which I've recently announced an extension of 2 years to, and a 10% increase to as well, so that we can continue to meet the needs of adoptive and special guardianship families. And we've introduced the first national definition of kinship care, published statutory guidance and appointed a national kinship care ambassador. We will continue to go further. I know that many kinship carers face financial hardship, which is why the government will very soon be launching a large trial that will represent the largest single financial investment in kinship carers this country has ever seen, to test the impact of providing a weekly financial allowance equal to the national minimum allowance for foster carers in a number of local authorities across the country. The allowance won't be means tested and it won't impact benefits like universal credit. Yes.
Melanie on.
I just want to thank the Minister for the serious consideration that has been given to this pilot. It is exceptional. We've heard from the Honourable Member for Strangford about what a difference that financial support makes, and I congratulate him on making sure that this happens for these families who are not asking for the earth. They're really not. They just need a little bit of help, and they want that money to go towards the children that they are looking after.
I thank my honourable friend for mentioning that, and it's because of the tireless campaigning of so many kinship families over the years that has led the government to the point of setting in train these changes, which will be announced in full very soon, but also the fantastic work and championing done by the APPG, which my honourable friend is the chair of, that has meant that we're now in a position to take these steps in the next few weeks. Through the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, we're legislating to require every local authority to publish a clear and accessible kinship local offer, which sets out the support available to kinship carers and children. The National Kinship Care Ambassador will provide support and expertise to support local authorities in implementing this new national duty, and will shortly release a national report summarising learning generated through engagement with the sector. This is the first step in creating a national kinship standard to create a consistent framework across the country for kinship care, directly tackling the postcode lottery of support that currently exists. My honourable friend raised the importance of kinship carers having employment leave rights equal to those of parents who are adopting. I want to reassure my honourable friend and the House that we are considering this. The government has launched a review of the parental leave system and is clear that kinship carers and the parental leave they are entitled to is within the scope of this review. And I would like to thank all the carers who have already taken the time to respond to the review already. We will also improve data by adding a kinship indicator to the schools census in autumn 2026 later on this year, and launch the first national study focused on children's experiences in kinship care. Making sure children have someone advocating for them in education is vital, and will make sure that the virtual school head role has a statutory footing for children in kinship care in 2027. And of course, the generational reforms to send, announced earlier today, will support many children in kinship families. We know that the legal routes through which kinship care arrangements are made can be confusing, carry different assessments and entitlements to different forms of support, which is why we've asked the Law Commission to review the kinship legal frameworks. Taken together, this action shows how serious the government is about ensuring kinship carers, children and families are recognised, supported and valued. On the specific issue of identification for kinship carers, I am aware that there is an existing campaign promoting the need for kinship carer ID, led by Kinship Carers UK, and I acknowledge and want to thank that organisation for the work they have undertaken to shine such an important spotlight on this issue. It is of utmost importance that our National Health Service and other public services have robust systems in place to ensure that parental responsibility is recognised quickly and efficiently in all situations where a child is no longer being cared for by their parents, whether on a temporary or permanent basis. It is concerning to hear of instances where vulnerable children have been denied access to appropriate and timely medical treatment due to a combination of existing processes failing and a lack of understanding by professionals about what kinship care is. This issue of professionals not understanding kinship care is not unique to health services. Just last week, I was in Newcastle speaking to kinship carers who told me about their experience working with their children's schools and the continued need to re-explain the status of their special guardianship order. I've also heard of cases where kinship carers have copies of their SGO, but further verification of the validity of those documents is still sought by professionals. So the challenge is not simply about having a document setting out parental responsibility or the role a carer has in a child's life, but ensuring that services understand the nature of those orders itself. I agree that we need a clear way for kinship families to demonstrate where they have parental rights, and that is a recognised and accepted process wherever it's needed. However, I think the more pressing concern is ensuring that professionals across all of our services recognise and understand kinship care. I'm committed to having conversations with Kinship Carers UK, my honourable friend, the Department of Health, MOJ and local authority colleagues to explore the best way to ensure that the situation of kinship children and their carers is recognised and understood and they get the support they need in a timely manner, ensuring that public services do not add more stress during what can already be extremely stressful times. Across this House, I know we will agree that kinship carers are remarkable people who step in at extraordinary circumstances and times to give their kin a safe, stable and loving home within their family network. I think we all agree that it is not acceptable that there are situations where children are experiencing unnecessary delays in receiving important medical treatment or other public services due to challenges in providing the legal status of the guardian. I'm grateful for the contributions made by my honourable friend during this debate. I know he is a strong advocate for kinship care, and I thank others for their interventions as well. I look forward to speaking to my honourable friend, the member for Worcester, in the future about the progress we are making for kinship children and families, and to working with him on the specific issues of ensuring that kinship carers and family members are able to prove parental responsibility as easily as possible so that they can step up and step into the lives of these children readily and easily.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.